Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Today is January 19th, and we're looking at some of the remaining top free agents still unsigned and thinking about some potential landing spots for them. Let's do it. Hello, everybody. My name is Steven. This is the middle of the order. How are we doing today? I am quite tired myself, just got out of bed, but we're here to talk some baseball. And not much happened this week, to be fair. Just a couple of not mediocre, but none of the big signings have happened yet. We've pretty much got a month left before some baseball. Spring training in near 32-ish days or so. February 22nd, so that's always exciting here. Today we're going to talk about those couple of signings that happened over the week since our last episode, as well as talking about some of the top free agents still unsigned, because going into the free agency, outside of Ohtani and Yamamoto, there was a whole slew of guys who we considered the top free agent pickups, and well, they still are, because they are still free agents. So we're going to start there, actually, and dive on in. I picked out the 5 guys who I think are the top free agents remaining, and looked at some of the teams where I think they could end up here. So let's dive on in and start with Josh Hader here. Josh Hader, top closing pitcher, top relief pitcher, one of the best we have in the game right now. And it's not often a relief pitcher to this quality hits the market, and a lot of teams could benefit with their bullpen by signing this guy. He's been talked about a lot this offseason in terms of like speculations and everything, but not really anything major. It did come out, I think yesterday, a couple days ago, that the Astros were heavily pursuing Hader. And this does make sense for the Astros to do that. According to Fangraphs, their bullpen is ranked 14th, which isn't the best, but it's not the worst. And obviously, you know, the Rangers won the World Series last year, so they got to be competing with them this year. The guys you know from that bullpen, though, is Ryan Presley and maybe Brian Abreu. Those guys are good, and Josh Hader would definitely help that. Obviously, Ryan Presley, though, is the closer there. I'm not sure he'd be too happy allowing Hader to join that team. But outside of those two, I mean, there are names that you've heard of maybe that have come out before, like a Rafael Montero, a Matt Gage. But there really isn't anybody who, jumps out at you besides Presley and Abreu. That definitely, could use it. But from the beginning of the offseason, I think if in the episode where I talked about my free agent predictions quickly, I said Texas needed it. Texas is coming off their World Series win, incredible stuff, and, they needed to get some big signings, and they really haven't, which is, like, the unfortunate part about that. The Rangers, they've added Talamali, Kirby Yates, and then Castillo. So there's only been 3 kind of small signings for Texas, and Fangraphs has the Rangers bullpen ranked 26. when you're the World Series champion, like, you don't want to be that low. Obviously, last year they were probably also low in their bullpen. Their bullpen was god awful in the middle of that season. And they still were able to win the World Series. So I don't know if Texas is freaking out too much, but at the same time, a lot of things went right for them. The Mariners had their collapse, and then, in the postseason, their offense was doing it. Like, the offense carried the pitching at times outside of, like, their starters. We talked about the Rangers. Once they turned it over to the bullpen, that's when the teams, like, are supposed to strike. And that's what some of those teams did. The bullpen is a huge detriment to Texas right now. Jose Leclerc was kind of leading the way, and even he was giving up, like, home runs in the 9th inning, the one to the Astros and in Texas, to Jose Altuve, a 3-run home run that, put the Astros up 1. They were up 2, just needing to get a couple outs and blown save. The Rangers were horrid for that last year, and they're still going to be this year at the looks of it. Jose Leclerc and Josh Boers, they were good, like I said, in the postseason, but those are guys who are going to be able to not hold a lead. Kirby Yates, same thing. Brock Berkey, Cody Bradford was doing really well in the postseason, but his regular season numbers were awful. Chapman's not there anymore. There isn't a name here that scares me if, a team's going into the lead or going into the ninth inning and the Texas Rangers have a one-run lead. Like, that's nothing at this point. Fangraphs have all these guys. The only guy who has a sub-3 ERA is Josh Boers. Even the clerk has a 4.31 predicted ERA here. Texas really could use the help there because their bullpen is, when Oakland has a better bullpen than you, you kind of, need to fix that up big time. Another interesting spot that I was talking about, maybe, not really interesting, I guess. I was looking at the Guardians, but that would entitle them moving Class A, which there was trade rumors with Class A at one point, but it probably won't amount to anything too much, I would feel like. But yeah, outside of that, it seems like one of those two Texas teams are your best chances to land Josh Hader here. The only thing is that he's looking for a contract similar to Edwin Diaz, and there isn't really a lot of teams that want to, go out and pay that kind of money for Hader. But Hader's been amazing in his time in the big leagues, had a couple of moments where his, flaws have shown. But outside of that, he is a elite pitcher, closing pitcher. And if I was a team, I'd want to go get this guy, But right now, the most sense comes from Texas. That bullpen's not going to hold you. If you're not going to go get Hader, you got to go get 2 or 3 other guys here because that bullpen needs work. You can't just kind of hope that your guys, progress. Obviously, that's the ideal situation for Texas. But at the same time, too, you need to also help that out because these guys aren't going to save you games. There will be blown saves. You will probably lead the league in blown saves again. It's just, hey, if it leads to a World Series, it leads to a World Series, though. You can't complain if you're Texas. But, yeah, I would say Texas is my number 1 spot for Hader still, and the Astros are number 2. All right, now moving along, let's talk about one of the best bats in the free agency from the beginning who's still out here. Cody Bellinger. What a year he had with the Cubs. Kind of cemented himself back into the names of people, from MVP to nothing, back to now possibly something. There's a few spots for him, obviously. A big one, obviously, is going back to the Cubs. There is some options there for the Cubs. Obviously, Dansby in a Cubs, meet and greet. He said that the first thing that needs to happen is for the Cubs to go and re-sign Bellinger. So I put a little pressure on the head office to make a move here. The Cubs technically, they do have an outfield spot filled up, essentially. They would have Ian Happ in left field, Pete Crow Armstrong in center, and then Seiya Suzuki in right. Now, on Fangraphs, Seiya Suzuki isn't listed as a thing, so maybe you slot him in the DH spot. But they also have Mike Tauchman, and then technically Christopher Morel is there, but he will be finding most of his time in the infield. They could play Bellinger at first base if they do sign him, but even if it's P. Crow Armstrong, Ian Happ, and Seiya Suzuki, and that's the outfield they want to run, signing Bellinger still is going to help the Cubs team. And in what is usually a weak NL Central, the Cardinals, they're fixing up their rotation a little bit. The Brewers, who knows what they're doing. The Pirates and Reds have a lot of young talent slowly starting to come and creep. So, if you're Chicago, you maybe have a 1 to 2 year window with kind of the team you have right now, unless some significant moves are made. Signing Bellinger to a 4-year, 5-year deal, that's a significant move. That might help you guys a lot. But we'll have to see with that. Another team that's been talked about by some of the Beeline reporters here, the Blue Jays. Obviously, a lot of this talk has cooled off since Kiermaier signed because essentially their outfield rotation or their outfield lineup goes Dalton Varsho in left field, Kiermaier out there in center, and then George Springer in right. Funny enough, the Blue Jays are ranked 13th in center fielders in terms of Fangraph, and George, so obviously that's something they have there. Because Kiermaier is a pretty good center fielder. Obviously Bellinger, though, probably better, but at the same time, why would you have re-signed Kiermaier if you were going to go out and sign Bellinger? And you can't play Bellinger at first because that's where Vlad is, so do you DH him? He's too good of a defender. You would put him in right field and move Springer to the DH. Springer would definitely be the DH in that situation, but where would you play Kiermaier / Bellinger? One of them would be center, one of them would be right. So, obviously I would play Bellinger in right field, and I'm not sure if Bellinger is a right fielder, how he plays out there. So obviously the Blue Jays, at one point did make sense, but now really don't. But I'll tell you a team right now that definitely is in need of some outfielders and definitely needs something, and that is the San Diego Padres, because it is not good. Right now they're ranked 28th according to Fangraphs, and the guy they have listed out there is Jose Azocar. Now, I went onto the MLB, the roster for the Padres. How many outfielders are there? 2. Jose Azocar and Fernando Tatis Jr. Go get Bellinger, Padres. I know they're trying to shed payroll, but you look at this Padres team, and yeah, they messed up at some point because too many guys are owed too much money, and there are holes in this Padres lineup from the rotation to the bullpen to the outfield. You look at some of these star players and these star names: Fernando Tatis, Manny Machado, Ha-Seong Kim, Xander Bogaerts, even Jay Cronenworth now and then. Some young talent like Luis Campusano behind the dish. And on that rotation, guys like Yu Darvish, there have been names a lot at the time. But at the same time, the Padres are in desperate need of some help, especially in that outfield. Bellinger would fit nicely there. The only problem is, do they have the pockets and the money to go out and get him? I think the Padres should be one of those teams right now who are heavily pursuing Bellinger. But like I said, they know that they're not going to, or it's very hard for them to go to, I guess, or just can they afford him? Essentially, is what I'm trying to say. Another team, if you're looking at quickly, maybe the Guardians. If they are trying to be competitive in that AL Central. Miles Straw and Ramon Laureano really don't cut it out there in center field. Yeah, Miles Straw is fast and he's a good defender. Bellinger is easily just as good as a defender, if not better. But outside of that, there really isn't a team that kind of needs Bellinger. Obviously, the Rays could always use some impact players, but they don't go out and spend that kind of money. Yeah, outside of that, it's pretty much, everyone else is kind of set in with an outfielder or center fielder. So I would say the biggest name for Bellinger to get would be the Cubs. And then if not that, then the Padres. And then maybe an outsider's chance the Blue Jays. But I would definitely say Bellinger's top landing spots right now is Cubs and Blue Jays. Or excuse me, Cubs and Padres. But which one is going to get him? That is the question. All right, now let's take a look at Matt Chapman, a third baseman coming from Toronto. Some teams needed him. He was talked about the Cubs, but obviously that was earlier before they went out and signed. Who did they sign there? I think I was thinking of Candelario, and he signed with the Reds. Yeah, so the Cubs still could use a third baseman, to be fair, sticking with Chicago here. Right now, Fangraphs have them listed 18th. The guys they have there, Nick Madrigal, would be getting most of the time there, but he is a second baseman. Patrick Wisdom, but of course he is a power bat only type guy. They did trade for Michael Busch, who is listed here as well, so maybe he gets some time there. But obviously, if they want to wait on Busch, if Madrigal wants to go back to second base, Matt Chapman is a nice fit there for the Cubbies, if they so wanted. A couple other teams that I had here, the Brewers could use a third baseman. Right now, they have Andrew Monasterio listed as their everyday third baseman, and he's expected to do very slightly below average. They have the Brewers ranked 28th according to Fangraphs, just lower than the Rockies. But Ryan McMahon is there, so I find that interesting. But yeah, Andrew Monasterio, he came up last year, showed some promise, but is he ready to be the everyday guy already out there? I would say probably not. There was some young talent the Brewers tested out last year, guys like Sal Frelick. Some of them were really good. A guy like Andrew Monasterio, though, the hitting wasn't there. He is fast. He did play some good defense. But, the Brewers have always been kind of known these last couple of years, when they had their good teams, to lack hitting. That's always been one of the problems with the Brewers, is that their, hitting isn't the best, and then their pitching can't always keep up. The Brewers have incredible pitching staff. It's just that they don't have, the hitting in the offense to back up those numbers, which is why they always fall short in playoffs and why they always, have those ups and downs in this season. So getting Matt Chapman there, kind of, the defense would be 10 times better, and the hitting would be an improvement as well. So the Brewers could definitely be a landing spot for Matt Chapman. Another interesting one that I've been talking myself into and out of is the Mariners. We've talked about the Mariners, with their what are you doing, because I generally don't know. The only guy they've signed was Mitch Garver. Everyone else they've traded for. So for Haniger and Desclafani, they lost Ray. For Luke Raley, they lost Jose Capiano. For Zavala and Vargas, they lost Eugenio Suarez, who was their third baseman. Now, obviously, the Mariners are trying to shed payroll as well, and they wanted to stray away from guys who struck out. That's why they traded Suarez, and that's why they let Hernandez go, because those two were two of the top five guys who led the league in strikeouts. Right now, Luis Urias and Josh Rojas are listed as the third baseman, but Luis Urias is right now the everyday third baseman, according to Fangraphs. And it's not like he is a bad third baseman nor a bad player, but I'm just thinking Matt Chapman type caliber stuff, you kind of lock in that everyday guy, and you can put, Luis Urias somewhere else in the lineup. I don't think that harms the Mariners in any way, but obviously those strikeout numbers are a big thing. Matt Chapman, although, has some pop in his bat and can hit for contact when he wants to, he can't stray away from the strikeouts forever. He's one of those guys who tally them up a lot, so I'll be cautious of that. I don't think the Mariners are going to sign him for that reason alone, but it would be an interesting spot for Matt Chapman to go, because like I said, I really don't know the direction the Mariners are trying to go in. I just think they need to, they need to do something still, like a signing still. Maybe it's for that rotation now that Robbie Ray's gone, or is just Anthony Desclafani supposed to fill that spot? I don't really know. Another possible team here could be the Giants. Now, with the Giants, we've always talked about how they've been looking for those big names, those big player splashes. Jung-Ho Lee, sorry, was kind of that big splash for the Giants this offseason. But they still need some improvements here. Right now, J.D. Davis is listed as the everyday third baseman. There was actually rumors or some sort of small trade talks with him. If the Giants could try to move Davis, that opens up the third base spot for Chapman. I think the Giants could definitely go get Chapman. I think the Giants need one of these guys. Whether it's one of these other two guys that we'll be talking about. Matt Chapman, a good fit as well. But yeah, the Giants definitely need to do something. And J.D. Davis, manning third base there. Although he's had some good years with the Mets and Giants and had some good, numbers, his numbers aren't going to be eye-popping forever. So I definitely think they can move on from him, and I think Matt Chapman would be a good replacement, and that would help the Giants, who I guess are trying to be competitive this year, or at least look competitive, but you have the Dodgers, obviously, the Diamondbacks are there, and the Padres, who knows what they're going to be cooking up as well. So I'd be cautious for that. But yeah, San Francisco, if you want to stay competitive, I think Matt Chapman is the guy to get. So those are the three teams I think could desperately use Matt Chapman. I guess the Tigers could as well. Not saying the Tigers in that AL Central weak division as well. You have the Twins and Guardians, obviously, but the Tigers are an up-and-coming team. Maybe the Royals as well. Right now, the Tigers have Matt Vierling listed as their third baseman, Zach McKinstry, and then Nick Maton, all kind of split in time at third base, with Matt Vierling getting the most of it. But I think if you sub in Matt Chapman there, that would help out a lot. So I definitely think right now some interesting teams would be the Brewers and Giants. Definitely could use Matt Chapman. A team like the Mariners would be interesting just because obviously Luis Urias. And Tigers as well as an underdog favorite, because if they're trying to be competitive, like if they make one or two big signings, they are the division favorites almost. So watch out for Detroit, because they might sneak up on them. But yeah, that's what I have for Matt Chapman. Okay, now our last two free agents that we're looking over are both starting pitchers. Let's start with Jordan Montgomery here. Obviously, the beginning from the start, everyone was saying just re-sign with Texas. It makes a lot of sense. Texas still hasn't done it, so you got to start asking yourself, what's taking so long? Obviously, Texas wanted him, brought him to the World Series. Jordan Montgomery kind of led the way there with Eovaldi. Outside of that, though, technically, if you want to go off of things, the Rangers could use that starting pitcher, but also it's not really mandatory. I mean, their rotation isn't the best by any means. Right now headlined by Nathan Eovaldi. John Gray would be getting a lot of starts there. Dane Dunning, Andrew Heaney is kind of that four guy right now. And then also Max Scherzer, but obviously he's starting the year on the IL. Same with Tyler Mahle, so even that isn't anything crazy yet. So outside of that, there is that fifth hole still open there for Texas, and it just very much makes sense for Montgomery to come back here and re-sign. A couple other spots, though, if he ends up walking around for a little bit. Let's take a look at that AL East division, because there's a couple teams here that make sense, starting with the Baltimore O's. Listen, the Baltimore O's starting pitcher, like their pitching staff and just their team in general, is built on kids. Kyle Bradish, Dean Kremer, Grayson Rodriguez, John Means. Those are the kind of the guys right now. Cole Irvin as well. A lot of Baltimore's payroll is very low. They have money to spend, and they can go and get some top end guys. So far, the really only biggest move that they've made was going out and signing Craig Kimbrell. They haven't really added much afterwards. But like I said, they didn't really need to. A lot of these, guys are young talent who are locked up for a long time. But going out there and getting a guy like Jordan Montgomery will definitely help out. It will help the guys who are, already pitchers in your staff get better as well. They'll be able to learn from a lot. Whoa, that's not English. Let's chill out for a second. They'll be able to learn a lot from a guy like Jordan Montgomery. So I think he is a interesting spot there for Baltimore. Another one is the Red Sox. Boston was actually linked with Montgomery in terms of, a lot of people thinking they would be a good fit there, a good match. And I definitely see it, because right now the Red Sox rotation is a little bit shaky. Lucas Giolito headlines that. That's a guy they've picked up this offseason. Brian Bello, Nick Pivetta, Cutter Crawford, and Tanner Hyuk right now are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5s for Boston. A guy like Hyuk or Cutter Crawford could easily be moved to the bullpen for the addition of Jordan Montgomery. It would also end up being the ace of that staff realistically. And obviously Boston, we talked about them last year in terms of they were a good team if they were in another division, but because they're in the AL East, they're dead last. And that's the problem. You're in the AL East. You have to think like a big market, AL East team, or at least there's the Tampa Bay Rays, there's the New York Yankees, the Blue Jays, and Baltimore. You have to compete with all of them. All of them are very good. You guys are good. They're better. Boston needs to make some top tier moves sooner or later, or else they're going to be ending up coming last in the division for the next couple of years there. And that rotation, realistically, isn't scary. Yeah, they have a better rotation than Baltimore, but they do not have a better rotation than the Yankees. They do not have a better rotation than the Blue Jays, and they definitely do not have a better rotation than the Rays, despite, anything else. The Rays don't have a great rotation, to be fair. Zach Eflin, Andrew Savali right now. But that's because a lot of their guys, Jeffrey Springs, Drew Rasmussen, Shane Baz, are still kind of out dealing with Tommy John stuff and elbow injuries. So right now, they're not expected to get any, if not at all, time in the big leagues. So, Eflin, Savali, Zach Lettle, Ryan Pepio, and Taj Bradley right now are up there for the Rays. But even that is a better rotation than the Red Sox, according to Fangraphs, although it is very close. We know Tampa Bay is not going to spend any kind of big money for, Jordan Montgomery, but the Red Sox can and probably should, if not, they go get a bigger starting pitcher. But yeah, those are definitely the teams that I see Jordan Montgomery heading. He's either re-signing with the Rangers or heading to one of those AL East teams because they would desperately need some starting pitching. You can never have enough starting pitching. That's the name of the game. You always need as much as you can get. All right, and the last free agent to look at here that we're looking at is another starting pitcher, probably the best starting pitcher and probably the best pitcher or the best player still out there, and that is Blake Snell. Still out there still out there in free agency. And it's pretty crazy to think about that there are teams who could use Blake Snell who don't want to pay for Blake Snell. He's a 2-time Cy Young winner, and they don't want to pay him. He's looking for something a little bit north of $200 million. When the Yankees signed Stroman, there was a report that came out that said they offered Blake Snell a 5-year, $150 million that he turned down. So there are teams that could use a Blake Snell. Obviously, all the teams I already mentioned for Jordan Montgomery, you could mention for Blake Snell. It's just, a little bit more money. Boston, they're not going to be heavily competing unless they're competing for a wild card spot. Tampa Bay doesn't pay that kind of money for Snell. Baltimore is kind of the only team that I kind of, that would make sense for Blake Snell still. I think Baltimore could pay for Blake Snell, but obviously they want to keep their payroll low maybe. And then obviously if the Rangers don't get Montgomery, it would make sense if they kind of, flip-flop over to Blake Snell. But a couple other spots, I guess, are kind of the big one here. The Giants. Like I said, the Giants are in need of making some big moves, some big splashes. We mentioned this when we were talking about Matt Chapman. And, I mean, their rotation is listed high on Fangraphs, but that's also because of Logan Webb, who right now has a 4.1 projected WAR, which is very good for a starting pitcher. He is an elite guy, but is he surrounded by elite guys? That's the question. Ross Stripling is listed as the number 2 there, which is interesting. Obviously, Robbie Ray is with a elbow surgery, so he probably won't get back until late in the year. So for most of the year, you're relying on Logan Webb and then, some old veterans like Stripling and then some young talent like Kyle Harrison. And, Kyle Harrison, I expect to take a huge step forward this year, kind of his first kind of full major league season. But you also can't, bet on that. And outside of those three, there really isn't much here. So I definitely think the Giants need to go get someone. If it's not Blake Snell, then it's Montgomery. If it's not Montgomery, then it's one of the other starting pitchers remaining. But the Giants' rotation needs help. They cannot last on Logan Webb. They tried that for the last 2 or 3 years where it's Logan Webb plus others, and it just doesn't work because you win the day Logan Webb pitches, and then you go 1-3 or 2-2 the other 4 days before his next start. And even then, sometimes Logan Webb faces, Logan Webb's the ace, so he faces aces when they play, whether it be someone like Zach Gallen from the Diamondbacks, Cody Senga from the Mets, Yamamoto / Ohtani if it was the Dodgers, Spencer Strider for the Braves, and maybe Logan Webb can outduel him that day, but at the same time too, that you're relying on that Giants offense to be able to hit a guy like Yamamoto, Zach Wheeler if it's the Phillies. And, can the Giants offense keep up with those guys? I don't really know. So while Logan Webb is elite as they come, the rest of those guys need to be able to back Logan Webb, at least the offense does. And when Logan Webb isn't pitching, can you rely on Ross Stripling? Can you rely on Kyle Harrison? Can you rely on that bullpen? Their bullpen, by any means, isn't spectacular. They have some really good names. I'll give them that. But I wouldn't say it's like an amazing bullpen outside of, the Rogers brothers and then Camilo Doval as like the closer there. Outside of, Doval, Tyler, and Taylor, there isn't really top tier names there that make sense for me, which is why I think the Giants, if they're trying to be competitive, need to go get some pitching as a whole, but definitely in the starting pitching market, and definitely a top guy like Blake Snell. So that's what I'm going to say on that. Blake Snell, 2-time Cy Young winner. If I was the Giants, I would take the chance. I would pay Snell, get him to a big contract, and kind of let him be the number 2 for the Giants, because I think that would help them out big time. But if it's not San Francisco, like I said, I think Baltimore is a good spot for him as well. And then in Texas, if Texas doesn't go out and get Jordan Montgomery. But that is for Blake Snell, essentially. Speaking of the Giants here and staying with them here, they did make a move. One of the only moves that were made this week. They gone out and have signed Jordan Hicks to a 4-year deal worth $44 million. And this is a very interesting deal. And I've got quite a lot to say about this, actually, because I'm very interested about this move for the Giants, because Jordan Hicks, most of his career is 5 years. Most of it with the Cardinals, but of course he got traded last year from the Cardinals to the Blue Jays. And when we were talking about the Giants starting pitcher and looking at, the guys that they have and why they could use some help, part of the reason why is that Jordan Hicks is listed as a starter here. Not only is he listed as a starter, but I'm pretty sure the Giants have confirmed that they are converting him into a starter. Which I find very interesting. Outside of that, when I first saw the news of the 4 years, $44 million, I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty impressive. Because I want that to kind of be a new normal for the relief pitcher market. I don't like it when the relief pitchers go a lot of times on like a 1 year basis. And like if you're a top end guy, you're getting like the 10 to 15 mil a year. I mean, Hicks is good, but is he top end? I don't know about top end. But the fact that he's now being a starter technically, or is, being classified as a starter, they're paying him essentially as a starter, which means they're essentially paying him, to be a below average starter. That's kind of what the value there shows when you look at other starting pitchers and the money they get paid. Hicks has been a great pitcher. Great relief pitcher / closing pitcher for the Cardinals. In his 5 years in the league, he's pitched to a 3.85 ERA. Now, going back to the starting thing, it's not news that, Hicks wants to be a starter. Hicks has gone out plenty of times saying he wants to be a starter. And the Cardinals gave him some opportunities in 2022, which is technically his highest ERA in the big leagues. In 2021, he pitched to a 5.4 ERA, but that was only in 10 games. He only pitched 10 innings, and a lot of it, it was him dealing with injuries, even when he was playing. So I don't know if I'm going to count that. But outside of that, the 10 games in 2021, in 2018 when he debuted at 21, his ERA 3.59 in 73 games. The next year, 3.14 in 29 games. He didn't play during COVID year, so that brings you to 2022, which was the year they gave him some starting opportunities. His ERA 4.84. And then last year in 2023, in 65 games, a 3.29, 3.67 with the Cardinals, and then a 2.63 with the Blue Jays in 25 games. He was very good when he came over to Toronto. So why is his ERA so high in 2022 specifically? I think it has something to do with those 8 starts. Now, I went on to Baseball Reference and I tried to find all 8 starts, but it's kind of difficult because, like I said, he isn't really an actual starter, so he's not on like a 5-day rotation like some of the other guys. And obviously I could try to find like the winning pitcher and the losing pitcher, but that won't be all the case. So I did the best that I could. I found 5 of his 8 starts. He had 1 against Miami, 1 against the Diamondbacks, 1 against the Mets, 1 against the Giants, and 1 against the Blue Jays. In total, in those 5 starts that I found, so, maybe those other 3 are good, but I slightly doubt it. In those 5 starts that he made, he pitched 16.1 innings and gave up 12 earned runs. That's an ERA of 6.71 as a starter. His worst one was in Toronto. He pitched 3 innings and gave up 4 earned runs, 5 walks on 4 hits as well. So 4 runs on 4 hits and 5 walks from Hicks that day. The game against the Giants that he pitched 5 innings, his most, but he gave up 3 hits, 3 earned runs. There, the game against the Mets, he only pitched 2 innings, giving up 2 runs and walking 2. In the Diamondbacks game, he struck out 4, which was pretty good, but he gave up 2 hits, both of which were solo shot home runs. Pitched 3 1/3 innings there. And then that first start that he made against Miami, I believe that was the first one that I found. He pitched 3 innings, 2 hits, and earned a run there. So that's essentially his best start, and it's been downhill since. Obviously, when you're converting someone, you can't just let them go out for 6, 7 innings. 3 innings, 4 innings, the build-up is there. Could it work for the Giants? Could Hicks become a starter? For sure. 100% absolutely, it could work. The problem is Hicks throws fast. He throws like 101, 102 on a consistent basis. That's his fastball. And that, for a full season, if he makes a full 32 starts, that's going to weigh on his arm heavily. And like I said, going off of the 5 starts that I found, his ERA is 6.71. The Cardinals gave him the opportunity, and let's be honest, he kind of fumbled the situation. But Hicks has always been a good player in my mind. And like I said, when he came over to Toronto, a 2.63 ERA, 25 games. He even made 4 saves to the Blue Jays, even though, Romano's there. Only gave up 2 home runs in that time, 7 earned runs. He is a good pitcher coming out of the bullpen. I don't know if his success and his low ERAs and his good numbers can translate when he's starting a big league game. Maybe he's going to prove me wrong. I don't think so, though. I really think that the Giants are better off having Hicks come out in the 8th inning as that setup guy for Camilo Doval. I think that's where his real value lies. Not even as a closer, as that 8th inning setup guy. I think that's where Hicks is best fitted for, given his success throughout the big leagues, his ups and downs. When you look at his numbers, I feel like he finds most of his best numbers and his best stuff coming from the 8th inning. Let's see actually if I can pull up the splits here for him via innings. Yes, we can here. Okay, so yes, by inning here. So in the first inning of a ball game, his ERA is 4.5. His third inning is 6. His fourth inning is 9. Yeah, not great there. Most of the time he comes out, it is in the 8th inning. He has 83 games when he comes out in the 8th inning. Looking at, I should have just done this in the beginning. When he pitches from the innings, from the first 3 innings of a game, he's pitched that 8 times. Of course, his 8 starts. His ERA is 4.15, or 4.15. Yep, that's the number I'm looking for there, which is lower than I said with the 6 point something, but it's still his highest. Is in his innings between the fourth inning and the 6th inning. His ERA is 3.48, which is the lowest, but it's only 34 games. Innings in the last 3, 7th to the 9th, he's played 185 games to a 3.7 ERA. So like I said, his best time and his best numbers come from the 8th inning, or at least in the late half of the game. In the 9th inning, actually, he's made 73 73 appearances. And his ERA in the 9th inning, 2.63. So take those numbers, do what you want with them. But in my mind, the Giants are going to try him out as a starting pitcher probably. Great. How long will that last? I don't know. Like I said, I think he's better off coming out of the bullpen than he would be, starting a game for the Giants. Now, obviously, the Giants will do what they need to and do what they want, but I've said my thing here. I generally think Hicks is built for the late end of a game and not the starting pitcher. But regardless, no matter what happens, Hicks, I believe, is a good pitcher. I think the Giants made a good move here getting him. Now, are they going to use the good move to get some decent innings out as a starter, or are they going to use the move to get a very good setup / closer / late inning guy like he's been his career? That will be remained to be seen, I guess. I guess we'll have to wait for spring training to see how he does. All right, last bit of news here to talk about. We'll talk about this one briefly. The Blue Jays have also signed a pitcher, Yariel Rodriguez from Cuba, a 4-year, $32 million deal. I should also mention that the international signing period has come and gone. All teams at least signed one guy. Some teams signed multiple. So, just throwing that out there. There was nothing too notable, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that. The Blue Jays are signing Yariel Rodriguez from Cuba. He is 26 years old. Had played in the Japanese leagues, I believe. A little bit in the MVP. He also pitched in the most recent World Baseball Classic that happened earlier this year as well. And his numbers are good. He has done a mix of starting and, coming out of the bullpen in his career. The last time he's actually started a game, though, was in the 2020-2021 seasons. So recently he's been more of a bullpen guy, and that's where he's found a lot more of his success. The last year he pitched, I believe, looking at this here on Baseball Reference, 2022, he posted a 1.15 ERA with a team there. So yeah, I think it's a good move. The way people have been talking about it seems like he's a very good pitcher. It's kind of giving the same energy as the Jordan Hicks thing, as do the Blue Jays use him as a starter or a relief pitcher? A lot of that has to be instead with how Alek Manoah pitches. Do they kind of start him this year as like a bullpen guy, and then when, Kikuchi's done next year, I think Kikuchi's a free agent, they move him to the starter role then. So some options there for the Blue Jays, but regardless, it's a good move for the club. That's going to do it for us here today. I didn't want to spend too much time talking about that, obviously, because there's only so much you can know about a player, and to be honest, I don't really know much about him, but from the small amounts of clips and videos that I've seen on MLB Network, it seems like he's good. People talk about him in a good lighting. So I don't really have much to say about that. But yes, so thank you everybody so much for listening to today's episode. Yeah, we're getting closer and closer. I'm excited. So, yeah, I guess we're going to end it there. Thank you, everybody, so much. And I will see you next time.